Emily's Bridge. Located in Stowe, Vermont, Goldbrook Bridge is not your ordinary covered bridge. This bridge is also known as Emily's Bridge, due to the fact that it is said to be haunted by a ghost named Emily. There are many stories of how Emily died on the bridge. One story is that she was supposed to elope with a lover who was meeting her at the bridge. And when he didn't show, she hung herself from the rafters. Another version of this Vermont legend also states the love story. Emily met a man who stole her heart, and the couple had made plans to marry. The fateful day arrived, and Emily went to the church in her beautiful red wedding dress, ready to give herself to the gentleman in holy wedlock. The groom never arrived, and the jittered bride took the family wagon in a frenzy of anger and sorrow. She was merciless on the horses and whipped them until they traveled at an incredible pace, planning perhaps to confront the faithless groom. As she approached the bridge, she failed to negotiate the turn right before the bridge and drove the horses and carriage over the bank and into the rocky brook below. Both the horses and Emily were killed in this accident. Although there is no written historical evidence that Emily ever existed, however, the first mention of the bridge being haunted by someone named Emily came after 1968, when a high school student wrote a paper on the subject, claiming that while they were using an Ouija board on the bridge, an entity presented itself named Emily. Other people using Ouija boards have reported that an entity was identified as Emily and said that she was killed on the bridge, but by her fiancé's mother. Many people have visited the bridge and experienced disturbing paranormal activity. People have reported scratch marks appearing on their vehicles when they were parked on the bridge, and being touched or scratched by Emily themselves. Often, strange noises are heard on the bridge, like footsteps, ropes tightening, and a girl screaming. Many have also reported seeing a white apparition around the area of Emily's Bridge. People have parked their vehicle on the haunted bridge and say that they tend to hear banging noises that are said to be Emily hitting the vehicle on the outside, or a dragging sound across the top of their cars. The most distinct paranormal events tend to take place between the hours of 12 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. Dr. Timothy Clark Smith. In life, Dr. Timothy Clark Smith of Vermont had been so concerned about being accidentally buried alive that he arranged plans for a special crypt to be constructed upon his death. He was deeply afraid of contracting sleeping sickness, which would give the illusion of death until the unlucky individual woke up alive, trapped in a cold, dark grave. So upon his death on Halloween of 1893, the doctor was interned at Evergreen Cemetery in New Haven, Vermont, in his specially prepared grave. It consisted of an odd, grassy mound upon which a slab of granite was placed. The stone was fixed with a small 14-inch square window looking down into the earth, with a 6-foot cement shaft leading down to Timothy's face. According to old cemetery records, there is a second room in this burial vault, which houses Timothy's wife. A set of stairs led into the crypt, capped by the stone in the lower front of the mound. Though the glass in the window is now scratched, stained, and hazy with condensation, people years ago claimed to have seen Timothy's skeletal face looming in the darkness. as well as a hammer and chisel nearby to aid in his escape. Another legend claims a bell was placed in Timothy's hand to allow him to signal in case he woke up. The Curse of Brunswick Springs. In Vermont's fabled Northeast Kingdom, there is a magical spot that Ripley's, believe it or not, once called the eighth wonder of the world, the Brunswick Mineral Spring. 6 individual streams of water run side by side from the same knoll. Strangely, the mineral content of each is vastly different from its neighbors. They are iron, calcium, magnesium, white sulfur, bromide, and the most daring arsenic. The springs are all but forgotten now, but in pre-colonial days they were well known to Native Americans as medicine waters of the Great Spirit. Their curative powers, the Indians believed, were a precious gift to be shared. The first record of mineral cure was in 1784, when Indians brought a wounded British soldier to the spring. They used the medicine waters to heal his damaged arm. But free sharing soon became free enterprise when colonial businessmen saw an opportunity to sell what nature gave for free. The Indians, of course, objected. A fight started. 2 young Native Americans were killed. The mother of one, a shaman, spoke these words: "Any use of the waters of the Great Spirit for profit will never prosper." It seemed like a warning, but proved to be a curse. For a century, all was well. Boarding houses opened, providing travelers with convenient access to the springs. Then, in the mid-1800s, something happened that changed the economic face of Vermont. Railroads had spread their iron arteries throughout the state, making trips to the springs almost effortless. Dr. D.C. Rawell opened a hotel called the Brunswick Spring House. It prospered until the good doctor made a fatal mistake. He opened a bottling plant. For the first time, the waters were for sale. Perhaps the Great Spirit saw the waters would be forever lost to all but the wealthy. And in 1894, the hotel burned to the ground. Determined, Dr. Rawell rebuilt, calling his new operation Pinecrest Lodge. He prospered until he passed away in 1910. Now, with the 20th century up and running, the worst collision with the supernatural was about to occur. John C. Hutchins, of nearby North Statford, looked at the springs and saw a gold mine. With Robert Ripley promoting and the railroad furnishing transportation, how could he lose? He bought the place. Then, on September 19th, 1929, that hotel burned. It was a freak accident, he thought, so why give up on a good thing? Mr. Hutchins decided to replace it with a grander resort. A local contractor with the unlikely name of Harry Savage worked his crew all winter to complete this hotel by the springtime. And it was beautiful. 4.5 stories high, 100 rooms, plate glass windows, and a 155-foot terrace. Staff were hired, guests had reservations, and 2 elegant Parkland limousines were ready to taxi folks from the railroad station. On May 15th, 1930, 1 month before the hotel was set to open, the night watchman spotted smoke billowing from a storage room. Before he can call for help, the phone line snapped. cutting him off from the rest of the world. The flames raged, and by midday the hotel was a maze of twisted pipes and smoldering timbers. If the Great Spirit was trying to tell him something, John C. Hutchins wasn't listening. 2 fires in 2 years was not enough to discourage him. He would build again. And by now, Harry Savage's crew was in practice, so the new hotel went up easily. By spring of 1931, he was ready for business. They remembered everything but the shaman's words. Any use of these waters, of the Great Spirit for profit, will never prosper. And on April 23rd, 1931, John C. Hutchins' third hotel burnt to the ground. Apparently, this was enough to make him a believer, and he never tried to rebuild again. And in the many years that followed, neither has anyone else. Boots Berry. Storm sounds from your average run-of-the-mill winter snowstorm or the fancy footwork of an 1800s spirit who supposedly haunts the inn. The story of former inn horseman, now ghost, Boots Berry, and his need to tap away across the inn's roof in bad weather is the stuff of intrigue no self-respecting historic New England inn should be without. The son of an inn chambermaid and horseman, Boots, was born in 1840 in room 302 of the inn's third-floor servants' quarters and grew up to be a respected horseman himself. He realized local fame when he saved stagecoach passengers from a certain doom when the coach's horses bolted down Stowe's Main Street one day, deemed a hero and awarded a medal. Boots was lauded throughout the county, and from then on he found he was never in need of buying his own drinks ever again. Though drink proved to be his downfall, however. Boots was dismissed from the inn for neglecting his duties. He took to wandering the county and got his nickname when a fellow prisoner in New Orleans jail taught him how to tap dance. Boots eventually drifted back to Stowe, as fate have it. In 1902, Boots happened to be on hand to save a little girl who was stranded on the inn's roof during a snowstorm. Remembering a secret childhood route to the rooftop, Boots reached the girl and lowered her to safety before slipping and falling to his own death. From the roof, right above room 302, where he was born. Now legend has it that Boots' rooftop tap dancing steps can be heard today during any snowstorm. The Hayden family curse. William Henry Hayden, known as Will, moved his family to Albany, Vermont in the early 1800s. He borrowed money from his mother-in-law, who was a widow and financially well off. She moved in with the family, and her money helped the family settle into this new community. Will never paid this loan back, and several years later he found himself in serious financial trouble. He once again approached his mother-in-law and requested an additional loan. Though this time she refused and now uncomfortable moved away from the family. In the following months, she was struck by an ongoing illness. Now suspicious, she accused Will of poisoning her. In 1809, as she lay dying in the presence of her daughter, Silence, she uttered an ominous curse in which that she declared the name Hayden would die and pass into oblivion. The Hayden name shall die in the 3rd generation, and the last to bear the name shall die in poverty. She bitterly announced she refused to be buried in the Hayden family cemetery. She instead requested to be in a neighbor's family plot. Life went on and the curse was forgotten. Will Hayden's daughters all got married and supplied the couple with several grandchildren. But the family's luck and fortunes quickly took a turn for the worse. Of the couple's 4 sons, all but one had died young. The one that survived, Henry, was named after his father. He slowly started to show signs of erratic behavior. Will and his wife, Azabah, became estranged after Will lost most of the family fortune. He later also lost his eyesight. Will at one point had fled to Canada to avoid his creditors, but he did die later in New York, penniless. Will's son Henry Jr. built an extravagantly furnished home for his family in 1854 after his father's death. Henry Hayden Jr. family quickly became the envy of the neighborhood. The family would take regular pleasure rides down South Albany Road in handsome horse-drawn carriages. Henry's family lived comfortably, with many servants to fulfill their needs. Their annual New Year's party, held in the new mansion's 3rd-story ballroom, was its spring-suspended floor, and was always a big success. As Henry Jr. continued to grow unstable, his mother cut him out of the will. He had one daughter named Mimey, and he died. He died in 1910 of a cerebral hemorrhage. Henry Jr.'s body was carried in a horse-drawn hearse that passed his old home on the way to the cemetery. The curtains in the window were shut in tribute, but by the time his mansion had been empty for 20 years, because he could no longer afford to live in it. Many now recall the mother-in-law's curse and believed that it had taken its toll on the Hayden family. The only Hayden left alive was Henry Jr.'s daughter, Mamie. All that was left of her inheritance was an unsavory family reputation and a large number of unpaid bills. Ill and humiliated, she moved to Waterville, Maine, where she died alone in poverty in February 1927. She was the last victim of this curse. People passing by report seeing strange lights. Others mentioned hearing music coming from the 3rd-floor ballroom. They stated this room was brightly lit at the time they heard this music. Some believe that the ghosts of the Chinese immigrants that Henry smuggled into the country remain. These workers were often buried in unmarked graves near the family's farm. I hope you ghouls enjoyed these Vermont urban legends as much as I did. I really like them. They're very long. That Timothy guy was definitely paranoid AF to be buried in a thing with a window and like a chisel in his hand or like a bell or something. Be like, yo man, I'm still alive. Like what would you do if you were like walking past his grave and all of a sudden you hear ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling, or like him like clawing away at the window? Yo, I would freak out, to be completely honest. Started the zombie apocalypse right there. Yeah, I guess that's it, ghouls. The last video will be on the top left. The next video will be on the bottom left. All my social medias are on the screen as well as in the description box below. And remember, there's always someone or something watching you.